It wasn't the rain that stopped her. It was the kindness she didn't see coming. Amara Keene, newly appointed CEO of Gleamtech, stood trembling under a flickering street lamp. Drenched, clutching her crying son with both arms. She had just fired her entire executive transport team for treating junior staff like dirt. Her first act as CEO, no chauffeur, no black car, just her child, in a city she hadn't set foot in for over a decade. The rain was unrelenting. Her heels were soaked. Her blouse clung to her back. The boy whimpered against her neck, cold and frightened. And then a stranger stepped forward. No words, no hesitation. He simply handed her his umbrella, just like that. He was younger than she expected. Late 20s, maybe. Worn hoodie, wet hair, eyes that didn't flinch from discomfort. He didn't recognize her, didn't care who she was, didn't ask. He just looked at her son, saw the way he shivered, and offered the one thing he had. "Take it," he said. She tried to decline. Instinct, pride, whatever was left of it. But her son coughed, a soft, wet sound that cracked through the moment. Then she took it. "Thank you," she whispered. He smiled faintly, nodded once, then stepped back into the rain without a second thought that umbrella would end up folded neatly in her penthouse that night. And the man who gave it to her, the man whose name she didn't even know, would soon find his life turned upside down, because acts of real kindness, the kind given without angle or expectation, don't just disappear into the rain, they echo. Amara didn't sleep that night. The umbrella lay open on the floor of her penthouse living room, dripping silently onto the marble. She could have set it aside, tossed it in the corner, or handed it off to housekeeping in the morning. But didn't she just stared at it? It was unremarkable. Black canopy, wooden handle, worn smooth from use. One of the metal spokes was slightly bent, and the smell of rain and old leather hung in the air. But in that quiet, sterile apartment filled with things she'd earned but never cared about, it was the only item that felt real. She sat on the edge of the couch, her son finally asleep down the hall, and replayed the moment again and again. No one had given her something without asking who she was in years, maybe ever. In her world, the world of boards, buyouts, and broken promises, every favor came with a string. Every handshake, a silent deal. But this man, this stranger, he had handed her his only protection from the rain, then walked away like it didn't matter, like she mattered more, and he didn't even know her name. Amara stood up suddenly, a sense of restlessness rising in her chest. She walked over to the umbrella, picked it up gently, and folded it closed. Something inside shifted as she did. A quiet resolve anchoring into place. She wasn't going to let this go. The next morning, while the city stirred beneath a gray sky, Amara called in her assistant. "Rachel," she said as the call connected. "I need you to find someone for me." There was a pause on the other end. "Okay." "Ho, a man, mid to late 20s, brown hair, works with his hands. He gave me an umbrella at a bus stop last night, Flushing Avenue, around 7:30 p.m. That's all you've got?" "That's all I need." Rachel didn't ask more. She knew better than to question Amara when her voice sounded like that. Calm, firm, unshakable. By noon, a discreet internal team at Gleamtech Security Division had pulled traffic footage from surrounding intersections. A few stills showed a blurry profile. Software enhanced the image just enough to get a rough match. Eli Navarro. No criminal record. No social media presence beyond a long abandoned profile. No LinkedIn. No recent tax filings. It worked. Odd jobs over the years. Barista, warehouse loader, part-time technician. Nothing consistent. No degree listed. But he'd recently taken a temporary contract repairing espresso machines through a local vendor. One of his work sites, Bean Theory. A boutique coffee shop just 3 blocks from Amara's building. Bingo. Amara closed the folder and exhaled. She wasn't sure what she'd say, or even why she needed to see him again, but something in her refused to let the moment dissolve into just another anecdote. The next day, she walked into Bean Theory unannounced. It wasn't a glamorous place, cozy, rustic, the kind of place where everything felt like it was reclaimed, wood or meant to be. She ordered a chai latte, then sat near the back window, waiting. And then he appeared behind the counter, crouched beneath a half-disassembled espresso machine. His head was down, sleeves rolled up, hands steady as he adjusted wiring with a quiet focus. He didn't see her at first. He stood, wiped his hands on a rag, and turned, eyes scanning the room. Their eyes met. Eli paused for a second. Neither of them spoke. Then he tilted his head slightly, as if trying to place her. He remembered the rain, her face, the boy, the umbrella. "Hey," he said slowly. "Hi," she replied, standing up. "You gave me your umbrella the other night, I remember. You looked like you could use it more than I could," he added. She smiled. "I was soaked." "Did you? Weren't wrong?" He nodded once. "You didn't have to track me down to say thank you." "I know," she said. "But I didn't come here just to thank you." Eli raised an eyebrow, intrigued but cautious. "Then why?" She hesitated just for a second. "Then because what you did, it wasn't small to me. It wasn't just a gesture. It reminded me of something I'd forgotten. And I think it's something my company has forgotten too." There was a pause between them. The low hum of the cafe filled the silence. Someone behind the counter frothed milk. A spoon clinketed against ceramic. Eli crossed his arms. "What company?" Amar extended a hand. "AIM," she said. "I'm the new CEO of Gleam." He didn't shake it. Not out of disrespect, just surprise. "Okay," he said slowly, absorbing the words. "And you're here because I gave you an umbrella." "I'm here because you didn't." "Ask who I was before you did?" Eli blinked. "You did it because it was right," she added. "And I think maybe that's exactly what I need more of. In a place where decisions usually start with titles and end with profit." She stepped closer. "I want to offer you something. A conversation. A visit. No promises. No pressure. Just come to my office. 1 hour. I'll explain everything there." Eli looked down at his hands, still smudged with machine grease. "I fix coffee machines," he said plainly. "I run a billion-dollar tech company," she replied. "Maybe that's why we need to talk." Eli didn't say yes, not right away. After Amara left, he went back to the espresso machine, but his hands weren't steady anymore. The conversation played over and over in his head as he tightened bolts that didn't. Need tightening and rewipe surfaces already clean. What exactly had just happened? He'd given a stranger his umbrella, a soaked, exhausted woman with a kid in her arms. He hadn't asked questions. He hadn't needed to. And now she was the CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the country, standing in his coffee shop, inviting him to her office. None of it made sense. But at the same time, something about it felt right. 2 days later, Eli showed up. He wore his cleanest jeans and a black button-up shirt that still had the dry cleaning tag from a wedding he didn't attend last year. His boots were scrubbed with a toothbrush the night before. He'd shaved. He'd even used cologne. The one his mom gave him 3 birthdays ago. But when he stepped through the glass doors of Gleam headquarters, every bit of preparation felt like it wasn't enough. The place was massive, cold, sleek, and humming with the kind of tension that only lived in buildings where ambition was currency. Everyone moved quickly. No one looked around. They were all headed somewhere. And Eli felt like he wasn't supposed to be anywhere at all. The receptionist looked up as he approached. Name: Ella Navarro. "I have a meeting with Amarin." A pause. Typed. Her expression changed slightly, just a flicker of surprise. Then she nodded. "You're on the list. Take the express elevator to 31. The ride-up was silent. It's just him and his reflection in mirrored walls. He looked calm, but inside his heart was racing. The doors opened into a floor with glass panels stretching from end to end where flooding the space with soft daylight. There was a view of the East River and a long corridor lined with artwork that looked more like stories than statements. Amara stood waiting at the far end. She wasn't in a suit, just a light. Sweater and slacks, no makeup, hair tied back. She looked real and somehow more intimidating for it. "Eli," she said, smiling gently. "You came? You asked?" She gestured to a small conference room. Not the giant ones with 12 chairs and catered water, just a round table and 2 mugs already waiting. Sit, she said. Let's talk. He sat for a moment. Neither of them said anything. Then Amara leaned forward. I'm not going to waste your time, what you did that night. It shook something loose in me, not just because you were kind, but because it made me remember how far I've drifted from the version of myself who would have done the same. Eli stayed quiet, listened the way he always did with his whole presence. I don't know what your story is, she continued. But I know people, and I know when someone does something purely out of empathy that's rare. Rare enough to protect. Rare enough to build around. She slid a small folder across the table. Inside, a role, a short job description, a title, Cultural and Human Values Advisor. What? What is this? Eli asked, staring at the words like they might rearrange themselves. It's a new position, Amara said. One I created for one specific kind of person. Someone who understands people from the ground up. Someone who sees past performance reviews and revenue charts. Someone who doesn't speak in buzzwords, but who speaks with humanity. Eli gave a small, disbelieving laugh. I fix broken coffee machines, she smiled. Exactly. You understand how to look at what's not working and make it better. He shook his head. I didn't go to college. I don't have credentials. Don't wear the right clothes. I don't even know how I'd fit in here. Amara leaned in, her voice low but certain. You don't have to fit in. That's the point. He looked at the folder again. It felt heavy in his hands, like it belonged to someone else. Someone with a different past, a different name. I'm not qualified, he said finally. You are, Amara replied. Not because of what's on paper, but because you reminded me that this company should be about more than metrics. She stood. I'm not asking you to say yes now. I'm just asking you to consider the possibility that your life doesn't have to stay small. Eli didn't move. He wasn't ready. But somewhere deep in his chest, under the hesitation and doubt, something had started to stir. A question. What if? Eli didn't sleep that night again. The folder sat on his kitchen counter, unopened since he left Gleam's office. He'd carried it home like it might fall apart if he looked at it too long, or worse, like he might. He'd walked all the way back to his apartment instead of taking the train. Not because he needed the exercise, but because he needed space to breathe. Every step felt heavier than the last. The offer wasn't just a job, it was a door. I thought, scariest thing about doors wasn't what was on the other side. It was what you had to leave behind to walk through. Eli stood in the cramped kitchen of his one-bedroom walk-up, staring at the small coffee machine he'd salvaged from a diner that went out of business last winter. It sputtered quietly now, a low mechanical sigh as if echoing the one in his chest. He'd worked hard to survive, but surviving wasn't the same as living. And this, whatever Amara had put in that folder, this felt dangerously close to the edge of living again. He poured himself a cup of coffee and sat on the worn stool by the window. And for the first time in years, he let himself remember. It had been 3 winters ago. He'd been 1 month behind on rent. His father long gone, his mother fighting off. Late-stage cancer in a county hospital 45 minutes away. He had just lost his 3rd job in 6 months because the warehouse downsized without warning. And on the day she passed, the power in his apartment had gone out. That was the first time he thought maybe the world just didn't want him anymore. But he didn't quit. Not then. Not yet. He started fixing things. Espresso machines, refrigerators, radiators. If it had wires or screws, he figured it out. He rebuilt himself piece by piece alongside every broken thing. But he'd never allowed himself to hope for more than just enough until now. The next morning, he showed up at Gleach again. No announcement, no appointment. He walked straight to the front desk with the folder in hand and asked if Amara was available. The receptionist blinked, picked up the phone, and spoke in hushed tones. Moments later, Amara herself appeared at the elevator. She looked surprised, but not unhappy to see him. You're back, she said. He held out the folder, not as an answer, but as a question. I read it, he said twice. I don't know if I'm the guy you think I am, but I know I'm tired of being the guy I've convinced myself I have to be. Amara smiled, soft, almost maternal. That's enough. She didn't ask him to sign anything, She didn't hand him a badge or walk him through HR paperwork. She simply said, "Come with me." They walked past executive offices, through a quiet hallway, and into a room Eli hadn't seen before. It was empty. No furniture, just four walls, sunlight streaming in through tall glass, and the faint echo of the city below. "This is yours," Amara said. He blinked. "Mine. We're building it together," she clarified. "A space where anyone in this company can walk in and talk. No hierarchy, no titles, just people." Eli stepped in slowly. It wasn't the room that got to him. It was the belief. But just as the door opened, another one closed. That night, Eli got a call from his landlord. The building had been sold. The new owners were raising the rent by 40%. His lease was month to month. He had 30 days to leave. He hung up the phone and stared at the wall. Then the next call came from the hospital. His younger sister, who lived 2 states away, had collapsed. From exhaustion while working double shifts as a home care nurse, no insurance. She needed support, and fast. Just like that, reality crept in through the cracks. The old life didn't want to let go, and Eli, who had just barely dared to believe he could have more, now had to choose whether he'd fall back into survival mode or step fully into the storm of change. Eli stood in the middle of the room. AOAOA, AOAA, AOAA, AOA, AOAA, AOAA, AOA, Omara had promised him. Sunlight pouring in, walls bare, but full of potential. And felt the weight of 2 lives tugging at opposite sides of him. One life offered possibility, the other demanded survival. That night, he packed a box. Just one, essentials only. He didn't have much to begin with. A few clothes, tools, an old photo of his mom, and a notebook filled with repairs ideas. Quotes he didn't know where he'd heard but had written down. Anyway, things like, "You can't fix what you won't touch." Hope isn't loud, it waits. Kindness is a kind of architecture. He closed the box and sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the wall where a leaky pipe had left a stain that looked like a question mark. What now? He had 30 days to find a new place, and just as little time to decide if he could keep showing up at Gleamtech while juggling his life falling apart in the background. His sister needed help. His rent was spiking, and every voice in his head was screaming, "This is why you don't hope for more, because more can be taken." The next day at Gleamtech, he walked into his new space for the first time. A real designer had furnished it overnight. Soft chairs, a low coffee table, a bookshelf, a kettle in the corner. It wasn't flashy, like a place where things could heal. Eli stood there holding his breath for a moment. Then he sat down in the chair closest to the window. 5 minutes later, someone knocked. A young intern, maybe 21, nervous, fidgety, eyes tired from too many screens and too little rest. "Hey," the kid said. "I heard you're someone we can talk." To Eli nodded. The intern sat down, hands gripping the fabric of his pants, and then he began to cry. Not loudly, just that quiet, exhausted kind of crying that comes when someone's been holding too much for too long. "I haven't slept in 3 nights, the kid whispered. "And I don't think anyone would even notice if I disappeared." Eli didn't give advice. He didn't offer platitudes. He just leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and said, "I see you." That afternoon, Amara watched from the hallway as 3 more employees came through the door of Eli's space. One woman stayed for 30 seconds just to breathe coffee and sat in silence. Another dropped off a note that simply said, "Thanks for being here, even if we don't know what here is yet." Eli didn't fix people. He didn't try to, but his presence had studied something, and Amara knew this was what she'd hoped for. A real shift, not in policy, not in strategy, in heart. But the twist came that evening. Amara was reviewing quarterly performance reports when Rachel, her assistant, stepped in. "There's something you should know," she said carefully. Amara looked up. "Go on." "We've received some concerns, quiet ones, from the board." "About what?" "About Eli." Amara's jaw tightened. "What kind of concerns?" "Background checks. He's never held a formal leadership role. No degree. He lived paycheck to paycheck for years. His sister's medical bills might be affecting his focus." Isra and some feel this whole empathy advisor thing is just you getting emotionally involved. Amara sat back in her chair silent. They're asking if you're protecting someone who doesn't belong here, Rachel added gently. Amara nodded once, then quietly set up a board meeting. Tomorrow I'll speak to it myself. That night, she couldn't sleep. She looked over at the umbrella, the one he gave her, now displayed behind glass in her apartment. A reminder, a promise. She wasn't going to let him be dismissed for the same reasons she once had been. For not fitting the mold, for not having the right story, not this time. The conference room at Glee was built like a fortress. Soundproof walls, floor-to-ceiling glass, a polished black table that stretched nearly 12 feet, and chairs that had supported more ego than wisdom. Amara had stood at the head of that table countless times during mergers, during layoffs, during innovation rollouts and crisis briefings, but never like this. This time, it wasn't about numbers. It was about a man with no title, no pedigree, just presence. And how that presence had unsettled the company's oldest habits. The board members took their seats one by one, murmuring in low tones, glancing at tablets and leather-bound folders. They weren't hostile, just skeptical, which was in some ways worse. Mara didn't wait for permission. She stood. I know some of you have concerns about the addition of Eli Navarro to our team, she began voice study. I'd like to address them directly. A few heads lifted. I brought him in because I believe this company cannot survive, let alone lead, if we continue to value data more than people. Eli doesn't come from an Ivy League background, doesn't speak in bullet points or quarterly forecasts. But in the last week, 5 of our most overworked departments have voluntarily sent employees to his room. Not because they were told to, but because they heard someone was finally listening. She looked around the table, not flinching. We talk a lot about innovation here, but emotional intelligence is still treated like a soft skill, an accessory. Eli makes it tangible. He makes it real, and no resume in this room can replicate that. One board member, older conservative, a former CFO, cleared his throat. With respect to Mara, empathy doesn't generate revenue. She didn't blink. Burnout does. So does high turnover, poor communication, silence. That costs us more than anything else. Another voice chimed in. So what exactly is his job? He's building a space where people feel seen. A human infrastructure. He's not a therapist. He's not a manager. He's a presence. A reminder that we are more than what we produce. There was an Amara said something she hadn't planned to. But it's not just about the company. It's personal. Every head turned. She inhaled once, then exhaled. I met Eli on a night when I was soaked to the bone, holding my child, completely invisible. To the world, no title, no power, just a tired single mother trying to stay warm. And he gave me his umbrella, without hesitation, without knowing anything about me. That night reminded me what leadership is. The room fell silent. She took a step. Closer to the table. I don't want a company that only hires the best minds. I want one that recognizes the best hearts, she sat. No one spoke for a long moment. Then slowly the chairman closed his folder. We'll revisit in 6 months. Consider this a provisional placement. Amara didn't smile. She nodded. It was enough for now. Meanwhile, across the city, Eli had just finished locking up the umbrella room. The space had been fuller than usual. Someone brought in snacks. Someone else left a stack of handwritten affirmations near the door. But what caught him off guard was a single yellow sticky note left on the edge of the couch. It read, "If you leave, this company loses its soul." He stared at it for a long time, and in that moment, something broke open inside him. Not like a wound, but like a door. Maybe he could belong somewhere. Maybe this wasn't a mistake. Amara stopped by a space. He was sitting alone, lights dimmed, sipping the last of a lukewarm coffee. You survived the board? He asked. She leaned against the doorframe. Barely. They're not sold, but they're silent. Eli chuckled. That's corporate for progress. Stepped inside, he said. I almost walked away today. Why didn't you? He looked at her. Because someone believed in me before I was ready to believe in myself. Their eyes held, and for the first time since the rain, since that night at the bus stop, something passed between them that wasn't just gratitude or mutual respect. It was quieter than attraction, deeper than admiration. Two people, two storms, one shelter. Eli's phone rang just after midnight. The screen lit up with a name he hadn't seen in weeks. Lena Navarro, his younger sister. His thumb hovered for a second, and then he answered, already bracing himself. Lena. A beat of silence, then her voice, hoarser and tired. Eli, I'm sorry. Wouldn't be calling this late if it wasn't serious. He was already grabbing his coat. What happened? She hesitated, and when she spoke, it came out in a rush. I collapsed at work. They think it's exhaustion, maybe more. I'm at St. Mary's in Trenton. I didn't know who else to call. I'm on my way. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need details. Okay. All he needed to know was that she was scared and that he hadn't been there soon enough. By 3 a.m., Eli was in the hospital hallway sipping burnt vending machine coffee and watching nurses move through the fluorescent light like ghosts. His sister lay sleeping behind a curtain, hooked to monitors, her face pale under the dim glow. She had always been the strong one, fiercely independent, a full-time caregiver, single mom to a 6-year-old daughter, and somehow always the one checking in on him. She looked like a shadow of that strength, and Eli felt something twist, hard in his chest. The doctor came in, quiet, kind. The diagnosis wasn't dramatic. Dehydration, malnutrition, chronic stress. But the implications hit harder than any headline. She needed to rest. She needed help. Real help. Not pep talks or temporary solutions. She needed someone to stay. At sunrise, Eli sat outside on a cold bench, eyes blurry from fatigue, mind racing. He had built something at Gleam Tech, space, a voice, a flicker of self-worth. But family was family. And this time, it wasn't about choosing between past and future. It was about responsibility. His phone buzzed. A message from Amara. Thinking of you this morning. Take whatever time you need. We've got you. He stared at the screen, then slowly typed back, Can I call you? An hour later, they spoke. He was parked outside a pharmacy, engine off, forehead resting on the steering wheel. I might need to step away, he said. Amara's voice came through gently. For how long? I don't know. A few weeks, maybe longer. My sister's not okay, and I can't let her fall through the cracks. There was no judgment in her silence, just breath thought. I understand, she said at last. But Eli, don't disappear. He smiled sadly. That's always been my specialty.
Not anymore, she said firmly.
You're not invisible here. Then softer. When you're ready, come back. The room will still be yours. Just as he was about to hang up, she added, There's something I should tell you. I wasn't supposed to take that bus that night. Amara said, My driver was late, my phone had died. I was furious, but I needed space from my team for myself. So I walked in the rain with my son. No plan, no protection, just a bad night. She paused, and then you showed up. Eli didn't know what to say, so she said it for him. Sometimes life sends you detours for a reason. I think you were mine. Later that day, Eli walked into a local clinic and asked for resources to help Lena recover long-term. Financial planning, food assistance, mental health services. He wasn't just trying to fix a crisis. He was trying to rebuild something solid. The way he used to repair broken machines piece by piece. But now, the thing he was fixing wasn't an object. It was a family. Back at Gleam Tech, Amara stood at the window of her office holding the umbrella Eli had once given her, a fully dried, still slightly crooked at the tip. She whispered to herself, he thinks he's walking away, but he doesn't see it yet. He's walking towards something bigger. Eli returned to New York 2.5 weeks later. Not because the situation with his sister had been solved. Nothing that real is ever solved quickly. But because Lena looked him in the eye one morning and said, You can't be the only one holding everyone up. You have a life now too. He didn't argue. He knew better than to fight with her when she used that tone, packed his duffel, hugged his niece goodbye, and got on a train. But something in him had shifted. This time, he wasn't coming back to try and prove he belonged. He was coming back because he did. The glee was quiet when he arrived. Just past 7:30 a.m., the lobby felt unfamiliar, like walking back into a house after someone rearranged the furniture. Employees nodded at him as they passed, recognition in their eyes. A few smiled, a few looked surprised. When he stepped into the umbrella room, he froze. It had changed. There were more chairs, a wall covered in pinned thank you notes, a bookshelf. Someone had filled with poetry and philosophy and novels. A fresh pot of coffee brewed quietly in the corner. At the center of the room, someone had placed a small wooden plaque. This is not a break room. This is a reminder. You matter even. When you're not producing, Eli swallowed hard. It wasn't about him. It was bigger than that. Now he found Amara upstairs in her office. She was on a call, but when she saw him through the glass, she stood up immediately and mouthed, 5 minutes. He waited. And when she stepped into the hallway, it was like all the noise in the building fell away. You're back, she said softly. He nodded for good this time. She smiled, but something in her eyes was different. Tired, distracted. What is it? He asked. Amara hesitated. Then there's been pressure since you left. From the board, she nodded. They saw the umbrella. Room gaining traction, engagement metrics rising, employees showing up early just to be there. HR reported a 20% drop in sick day use. That's good, Eli said, confused. It is, but they want to replicate it. Scale it, turn it into a program. He narrowed his eyes. Corporate empathy in a box. Exactly. They're pushing for templates, talking. Points a training deck, he sighed. They're trying to turn a heartbeat into a PowerPoint. Amara looked at him carefully. I've stalled them, but they're voting next week to decide whether to restructure the initiative. If they go through with it, your space won't be yours anymore. Eli leaned against the glass wall, processing. What if we show them something they can't template? Said after a moment. Amara raised an eyebrow. Like what? Something real? Something human? An impact story? One they can't reduce to bullet points? She tilted her head, curious. We invite them in, he said. Let them sit with the people who've been changed. Not presentations, conversations. Amara smiled slowly. That's bold. It's honest. The twist came that evening. After hours, Eli returned to the umbrella room to reset the space. As he adjusted a chair, he noticed a file folder sitting on the table. No name, no label. Inside, printouts of internal emails, board members, strategy heads, legal discussions about limiting Amara's discretionary authority, proposals to reevaluate leadership decisions, a drafted motion to call for a vote of confidence on her position. As CEO, Eli stood motionless, hands tightening around the folder's edges. This wasn't just about the room. They were trying to push her out and using him to do it. He walked into her office the next morning and placed the folder on her desk. Her eyes scanned the contents. She didn't speak. Her jaw clenched slightly, but her posture stayed calm. I didn't know it was this serious, Eli said. Amara looked up. It's been building for a while. I've challenged too many systems, cut too many. Executive privileges made too many people uncomfortable. They're afraid of what you're changing. She nodded. And they're using my presence to say you've lost objectivity. A beat of silence. Eli's voice was low. If I leave, does it stop? No, she said. If you leave, they win. The board meeting was scheduled for Friday. It wasn't just any meeting. One had weight, pressure, unspoken threats dressed up in professional courtesy. The words vote of confidence were printed on the agenda, but everyone knew they were floating between the lines. Eli had never been in a room like this before, but he wasn't afraid. He sat next to Amara at the long black table, dressed not in a suit, but in a clean button-up. In the same quiet confidence he carried the day he handed her that umbrella, around them sat men and women in tailored blazers, tapping their pens, scanning screens, watching Amara like she was both the leader and the problem. The chairman cleared his throat. Let's begin. Amara spoke first, calm, deliberate, focused. "No, there are concerns," she said. "Concerns about structure, efficiency, and the direction I've taken this company in. I know not everyone agrees with the human-first culture we've begun to foster." She looked around the room. "But I also know what we're building here is not a trend. It's not branding. It's not optics. Survival. It's the survival of meaning in an industry that's forgotten how to care." A pause. "I'm not here to defend a theory. I'm here to introduce you to a person." She turned slightly. Eli. Eli stood. His palms were steady. He looked out at the board, at the polished surfaces, the guarded expressions, and he didn't see power. He saw fear, the fear of disruption. Spoke slowly. "I'm not a consultant. I don't have a business degree. I've fixed broken things most of my life. Appliances, people, sometimes myself. But I was never hired to fix this company. I was invited here to remind it what it feels like to be human." A few board members exchanged glances. Eli continued. "I've sat in a room and listened to interns sob because they felt invisible. I've seen department heads admit they didn't know how to ask for help. I've watched employees come back from the edge of burnout because someone for the first time simply asked them, 'Are you okay?'" He let that settle. "I didn't build the umbrella room. They did. Your people, they made it what it is. I just opened the door." Then, without being prompted, he reached into his back pocket and pulled out something simple. A note, a crumpled, yellow sticky note, the one he'd kept from weeks ago. He held it up. "It says, 'If you leave, this company loses its soul.' I didn't write that, one of your own employees did. Anonymous, honest, raw." He stepped forward, placed the note on the center of the table. "You can restructure me, reassign me, erase the room if you want. But ask yourselves this. What happens to a place when people stop believing it sees them?" Silence filled the room. Not awkward, not tense, just full. And then something no one expected happened. A woman at the far end, Miranda, VP of Operations, slowly raised her hand. "I'd like to say something," she said. The chairman looked startled, but nodded. She turned to Eli. "You don't know this?" she began. "But I came to your room once. I didn't speak. I just sat for 20 minutes. That day I'd come from a custody hearing for my son. I was losing. I felt like a failure in every direction." Trembled. "But I sat there and you didn't ask anything. You just offered me tea and silence and space. That moment it saved something in me." She looked around the table. "We keep talking about metrics. Well, here's one. For the first time in 7 years, I didn't quit. I stayed. That changed the room." One by one, more hands went up. A project manager, a senior developer, even the usually stoic head of legal. Each shared a moment, a story, a crack in the armor that Eli had helped patch with presence, not policy. By the end, no one was talking about rules or structure anymore. They were talking about value, human value. When the meeting adjourned, no vote was called. There didn't need to be one. The storm had passed, and something new had begun. Later that night, Amara found Eli on the rooftop of the building staring out over the city lights. "You never told me you were going to do that," she said, stepping beside him. "I didn't plan to," he replied. "I just felt like they needed to remember." She looked at him. The man who once gave her a crooked umbrella with no questions asked. "You saved me that night," she said quietly. He turned to her, surprised. "Never told you the whole story," she added. "That night, I wasn't just exhausted. I was ready to walk away from everything. Gleam Tech, the pressure, the politics. I thought maybe I wasn't built for this world." "Hey." She looked up at him, her voice steady. "But then you gave me your umbrella." A stranger. No agenda, just grace. Ella didn't know what to say, so she stepped closer, and now I want to give something back. From her coat pocket, she pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a deed to a modest apartment 2 blocks from the office paid. Off. "This isn't charity," she said. "It's grounding, a place to build from. You belong here, Eli. Not because of what you did for me, but because of what you help others remember about themselves." It was raining again. Not a storm, just a steady, soft drizzle that wrapped the city in quiet. The kind of rain that made people walk slower, think deeper, breathe more deliberately. The kind of rain that started it all. Eli stood outside the new apartment Amara had given him the keys to. Modest brick, 2 windows, a small balcony that faced east. Morning light would hit it first, she had said. A place to begin again. He opened the door. Inside, the rooms were empty, but not hollow. The air carried the scent of fresh paint and possibility. A folded blanket sat on the couch, a small welcome note beside it, handwritten in Amara's sharp, elegant script. It started with shelter. Now build whatever comes next. 2 weeks passed. Umbrella Room stayed open. It's more than open. It flourished. Departments rotated through for morning huddles. Students from nearby campuses asked to visit and study the model. The room became more than a gesture. It became a compass. And Eli, he didn't just sit and listen anymore. He led workshops, quiet sessions, open hours where executives sat beside interns and talked about the things they never had space for before. And one afternoon, as the sun slid through the west windows, Amara stepped into the room holding something. In her hands, it's an umbrella, not the original one that still rested behind glass on the top floor. This one was new, sleek, black, engraved with a simple phrase on the handle, "What we shelter grows." She offered it to Eli with a soft smile. "Thought you might want this, just in case." He took it, smiled back, but said nothing. Not yet. Evening, they walked side by side under the city lights. Amara's son, Micah, now 6, ran ahead of them, chasing raindrops. Holding the first umbrella Eli had ever given his mother, still crooked, still standing. "You think he knows?" Eli asked, nodding toward the boy. "That the umbrella changed our lives?" Amara said, "Not yet, but he will." They stopped at the corner of 5th and Mercer, the same bus stop where it all began. The street light flickered overhead. Same angle, same glow, same kind of night. Eli looked at her, really looked. Not as the CEO, not as the woman he accidentally helped, but as the person who gave him something he never thought he deserved. Not just a place, but a reason to stay. "I've been thinking," he said quietly, reaching. Into his coat pocket, Amara raised an eyebrow. "That sounds dangerous." He laughed, then pulled out a small box, unassuming, not flashy. She stared at it, then at him. "Elele." He opened it. Its inside was a ring. Simple silver, no diamond, just a quiet shimmer. "I gave you an umbrella," he said. "Somehow you gave me everything back." A pause. His voice thickened, but didn't falter. "I don't know what the next chapter looks like, but I know I want to write it with you." Micah's laughter echoed in the distance. Amara blinked. Once, twice, then nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Of course, yes." He slipped the ring onto her hand, and for a moment everything stopped. The rain, the city, even time. It was just them. 2 people who met in the rain, one who gave shelter and one who became it. Sometimes, the smallest act, a quiet offer, a shared umbrella, can change everything. Not because it's grand, but because it reminds someone they're not alone. And from that moment on, nothing stays the same. Thank you for watching this story to the very end. If it moved you even just a little, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. We're just getting started. Every day a new story is waiting. More heart, more hope, more humanity. See you in the next one.